Hello, everybody. Scott Golden with Pro Wrestling Logic YouTube channel here, and today we will be dissecting the AEW Dark episode for the 5th of August 2020. If everything goes according to plan, I will have 5 or 6 pieces of content up over the next several hours, but that's, of course, if work doesn't carry me away. Overall, tonight's Dynamite was a decent show. There were things I didn't like. Some of them personal preference and some of them logic holes. But for the most part, it was a decent enough program. Obviously, I have not been around in a month. That does not mean, however, that I have not been watching the AEW program. Matter of fact, it's the only thing in wrestling in terms of national coverage that I consider can't miss television on a weekly basis. So we open with Taz, Tony Schiavone, and Jim Ross on the commentary team. I know that there are people who have been critical of this. I am completely a supporter. Finally, there are professional-sounding people in the booth, and the removal of Excalibur, for whatever reason, professional or personal or combination of both. If you want more on that, just a basic overview. About a decade and a half ago, Excalibur and Kevin Steen used racial slurs as part of a promo on an independent show, and supposedly AEW felt the need to address this by taking him off the air for who knows how long. Personally, I was never an Excalibur fan, and while I find him good for independent shows, I do not find him good for a national television broadcast and completely support his removal from the broadcast on the auspices of professionalism. While I do find it frustrating that there are not younger talents to be able to take over the broadcasting job, if that's the way it is, then AEW and other places, including but not limited to WWE, need to train some people up. But in the meantime, I'd rather have 3 competent people in there than 1 Excalibur any day. In any event, we move on to the 12-man tag, which I was not a fan of from a conceptual standpoint, simply because there's too many people in there, and it led to a match that eventually did tell a decent storyline story, which surprised me. However, it was also way too much move, spot. Let's do everything we know how in the shortest way possible. Anyway, match starts with Brody Lee and Nick, and Lee takes a good bit of punishment before tagging out to 9 as the person who is sacrificed to the whims of the Elite and FTR. They work him over for quite a while. Lee ends up getting back in, cuts off Omega with a kick on the floor, and the tide turns back to the Dark Order. Personally, I think the Dark Order has too many members in general, in the fact that they were able to fill out half of a 6-man or a 12-man tag, plus have more members later in the night, unless this is satire to make fun of bloated factions like the NWO Black and White and Red and Black back in the day. At some level, you got to trim the fat out of the Dark Order. Anyway, so Omega gets things going back his way, makes a short comeback on Stu Grayson and Uno, the original members of the Dark Order. Gee, that feels like forever ago, but it's less than a year. Nick does a dive to the floor, which is unnecessary, and I say that every week. Anyway, the match goes again, and there is a knee injury to Dax Harwood on the outside. Several members of the, I guess you'd say, babyface team make their way out to check on him. I don't know why you do an injury angle with FTR when they're just coming in, relatively new. I don't know. I mean, to me, if you're going to do an injury angle, why couldn't it be one of the Bucks? In the sense that if the Bucks aren't around, or even, well, no, I think the Bucks in this situation are the only ones. If the Bucks aren't around for a week or 2 or 3, it's not that big a deal. You can explain it away with the explanation that, well, hey, they have VP business to attend to. one of the FTR being away at this point, considering they're the best tag team and probably the best AEW acquisition over the last 6 months, just seems like a waste of a good acquisition. Anyway, most of the baby faces help Dax to the back, and he's limping away. Matt Nick, easy for me to say. Try that one more time. And Omega are in a 3-on-6 situation. Page makes his way back to the ring. Why he goes with FTR, I assume, is eventually going to lead to a Page turn on Omega and maybe siding with a heel FTR when that all happens several months down the road, because you've got to believe that this is leading to a heel faction formation that would rival the Dark Order and be more organized. But Page makes his way back. Page goes nuts. He beats on the Dark Order, clears house against 5 or 6 of them all at once, and Brody Lee looks on. Page hits a moonsault off of the post, and he also dares Brody Lee to make the tag. Lee finally does. He trades strikes, and then there's a cutoff. Cabana tags in and hits a Chicago Skyline. Omega saves Grayson, and Grayson hits a 450 splash on Page for the near fall. Bucks jump in. They do a super kick deal. And then there's a Snapdragon suplex from Omega. And the end of the match sees Page go for the last call lariat. And Lee ducks and hits a discus lariat of his own for the win. Again, I mean, a couple of things. One, with Page being one of your tag team champions, and the fact that from the standpoint he has not really had a lot of momentum as of late, although he's gaining some, and Dark Order has already been defeated by Page and Omega, I'm not sure that Page taking the fall here makes a lot of sense. I also don't necessarily believe that the champions taking a fall in the match when you're not necessarily building to a Dark Order rematch makes sense. One of the Bucks could have easily taken the fall, had the same effect, told the same story with FTR, told the same story with Page, but the Bucks really, other than the FTR match upcoming, which probably is going to be in the new year, I would imagine. But other than that match upcoming, they're irrelevant to the storyline progression of the promotion in terms of championships, at least for right now. Them taking a fall in the early part of August 2020 really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, and it would have been better for one of them to take the fall. Lee is probably, as the leader of the Dark Order, the right person to get the fall, although bringing him in and then squashing him to Jon Moxley has taken him down in the pecking order quite a bit. Best friends show up in their mom's van. I hate this. We're supposed to believe that people who are on national television, ostensibly relatively wealthy, right? Like, you would think they're making 6 figures or something. Can't be bothered to rent a car, can't be bothered to hire a limo, can't be bothered, as I think it was Taz, said, take an Uber or Lyft. It's sloppy, it's stupid, it's goofy. If the mom's van means that much, have her be the overbearing, loving parent first and be like, I want you to save your money for retirement because of COVID. I want you to whatever. Here, take my van. Have a reason behind why professional wrestlers who are on national television use a dilapidated vehicle to get around. It doesn't make sense, especially with them being baby faces, supposedly. Next, we go to a Jon Moxley promo. He's had a lot of demons in his past. What's interesting is I've heard him talk about demons both in character and out of character, but I don't think I've ever heard him really talk about the derivation of what demons means for him, and I don't think he's ever talked about what allowed him to get rid of them. So when he says this in a promo, it's rather irrelevant. People that cared about him, he says, tried to talk him out of fights. He didn't listen. He understands why Darby Allin is going to go all out tonight. Moxley says that the roles have been reversed, and rather than being the one who's taking the crazy risks and to be talked out of it, he is trying to talk Darby out of taking unnecessary risks. He knows that Darby isn't going to listen. He said that Darby Allin is one of his favorite people, if not his favorite person, in All Elite Wrestling. And he doesn't want to be responsible for ending his career or breaking his neck. Moxley then asks him to stay down when the time is right. It was a good promo, and it makes sense why two friends would do battle over the championship. Now, I think at some level, Darby Allin needs a really strong win. I have a feeling that there's a pretty good chance that Scorpio Sky might beat Cody Rhodes next week, as that was announced for the TNT Championship. Perhaps you go with a quick switch to Darby. My challenge in the way that Darby's been presented is he's a constant daredevil. He takes all the risks. And at 27 years old, he could have 5 or 10 really good years left. But at some level, he's got to win in big match scenarios. And we haven't seen that outside of maybe some tag matches. If you really want him to be a guy that you can build around, or a guy that your promotion's known for at a consistent level, you've got to let him win some larger matches sooner rather than later. Best Friends, which is, of course, Chuck and Trent, defeat Santana and Ortiz. The match goes way too long for my personal taste, although I'm not a fan of Santana and Ortiz. I know a lot of people are. I just see them as above average indie wrestlers who happen to be in the right place at the right time. I don't see them as people who you could put on a card, and outside of a smaller to medium-sized indie show, if you put them on a national television card, I can't imagine more than 2 or 3% of the ticket-buying audience saying, I'm there to see these guys. They're not bad in the ring, but I don't see stars when I look at them. Anyway, there's some good spots in the middle, but it obviously felt like filler just to fill TV time. Taylor has control early. Trent tags in and gets tripped on the apron. The announcers talk almost a little too long about how the apron has become part of the weaponry of the ring instead of just the ring apron. Santana hits a cutter for a near fall. Trent gets tagged back to Taylor. Taylor hits Soul Food and hits a Falcon Arrow for a near fall of his own. They repeat the tag and cutoff spots. And then Santana and Ortiz go for the street sweeper. Taylor shoves Santana off the top rope. And there is a short pin here. I guess this could lead to a longer program between the two. Maybe it's a build to some sort of gimmick match or blow off for the pay-per-view in a few weeks. But again, it's not something that people should write home about. So then we go to a pre-taped MJF segment. He is at his campaign headquarters. He's yelling at his campaign staffers. He makes fun of one of the staffers for hanging a poster wrong on the wall and says it's crooked. This is unacceptable. He tells a female staffer to smile or not talk at all. MJF says that just because he's got a championship shot at All Out does not mean his campaign is over. The person operating the camera asks if he's concerned about Darby Allin, and he comes back with a great line. He says it would be a horrible shame if he had to defeat a 125-pound emo kid for the championship. And, I mean, ultimately, MJF is great, probably the best parts, character-wise, of the program every time he's on television. So we go back to Matt Hardy being in the ring. He says he came into to AEW to come to a place where he's respected, where he could be an attraction and help younger talent. Hardy says he also wants to give back and help young talent. As Matthew Hardy, he says he's taken Private Party under his wing, and he tried to make the same offer to Sammy Guevara. Guevara didn't appreciate it and attacked him. Supposedly, he considers that giving him the proverbial middle finger. I guess it's been a while since Hardy's been in a real-life disagreement. Anyway, he says he no longer wants to help Sammy, and Guevara runs in. They brawl all over the place. Hardy gets the upper hand, sets up tables, and Guevara comes back and sends Hardy into the post, places Hardy on the table, and Hardy is bleeding all over the place. This is fine. It sets up a grudge match, hopefully for the pay-per-view, and Hardy going through the table and bleeding is a pretty good deal. Except later in the show, they do another angle with a gusher. You should leave that at one per show. They go to a brawl in the parking lot. Santana and Ortiz have a sledgehammer, and they're going after Trent's mom's van, and they spray paint Trent's mom's name, Sue, on the hood of the van, and they put an X through it. I mean, this is an old school way to get heat. Might have worked if there were fans in the crowd. Might have worked if there was a little more build to this. Off one match, I think it was a little bit of a strong angle for mid-card talent, but at least they're trying to give everyone a personality. Matt Cardona and Cody Rhodes with Arn Anderson defeat Alex Reynolds and John Silver of the Dark Order. Basic match, nothing to write home about. Actually, kind of sad that Cody, who has been really good about defending the television championship weekly as promised, ended the streak here for what amounted to a lackluster match. Cody takes a good bit of punishment, and he is doing the majority of the selling. Cardona has what would be considered a reasonable first outing, but the announcers, I think, oversold his importance. The fact of the matter is he was a mid-carder in WWE for, 10, 15 years, whatever it is, and he never rose above. I think there's a way if you spin it and say, hey, this is the guy's first real shot to shine. It's a new place. It's a new day. Give him a shot. That's good. But pretending that he's some sort of star that everyone should be ingratiated and happy to see, it's overkill, and I don't think it's as credible as one would like overall. Anyway, so Cody's selling his ribs for the majority of the match. There's a couple points where Arn Anderson almost looks as though he's regretting Cody taking the match, which I think is a good way to look at it. We see a lot of apron bumps, probably about 5 or 6 over the whole night, which anything done to overkill is uselessness. Reynolds and Silver continue to work over the ribs for quite a bit. They do this through the commercial. Cardona comes back, hits a drop kick through the ropes to the floor on both of his opponents, and hits a double underhook powerbomb on Reynolds for near fall. Cody hits Silver with a cutter. Reynolds sends Cody to the outside. Silver and Reynolds doubled up on Cardona. Cody and Silver did a suplex spot over the top into the floor. I don't like the spot. It always looks awkward. Even if it's done safely, it's too much danger and really not worth the risk. Cardona hits Reynolds with the radio silence for the pin, his finish. Cody makes his way back to the ring. He takes an extra long look at Cardona. Maybe I'm reading a little bit into it, but I still can sense a Cody heel turn coming, although where it comes and how it comes is part of the fun of his particular story arc. Anyway, Cody's making his way back to the arena entranceway, and he sees Scorpio Sky. Sky basically says he wants the TNT Championship, and he wants that soon. Best friends cut a promo on the outside in front of the vandalized van of Sue. They promise to get revenge and promise to make them apologize on speakerphone. This is just crazy and kind of silly. Guevara comes out to the stage, and he does the holding up the cards thing. One of the cards said that Chris Jericho, in fact, is a master debater. Okay, cheesy humor aside. Anyway, we go to the AEW Super Wednesday 2020 debate. I care more about this than I do the presidential debates, and the presidential debates are more of a work than this one. Anyway, so Justin Roberts introduces Eric Bischoff as the moderator, which would have been really cool had there been a live crowd. The announcers do a really good job of selling the surprise of Bischoff being here. Bischoff introduces Cassidy and Jericho. Cassidy enters first. Jericho enters with Jake Hager. Hager is carrying the jacket that Cassidy ruined with orange juice a few weeks back. The first question from Bischoff is, why do Jericho and Cassidy hate each other so much? Jericho answers that basically Cassidy doesn't care about anything. He didn't dress up for the occasion. Cassidy's in his usual, basically dollar store gear. Jericho said Cassidy's a joke, a flash in the pan, and plays pocket pool. Cassidy says nothing. I assumed going into this that Cassidy would say nothing the whole time. The way they played this is really entertaining, and it actually is kind of fun. The question is, the second question, who's the bigger star, better wrestler? Jericho said he's won 50 titles around the world, while Cassidy's only won biggest slacker in high school. Good line there. Jericho says that had they gone to the same high school, he would have stuffed Cassidy in lockers, stolen his money and his girlfriend. Cassidy again says nothing. Third question's about the rising sea levels. Jericho blew the question off as to be expected, saying it has nothing to do with the upcoming match. Cassidy gives a very scientific, detailed response, proving that he can, in fact, speak, but when he cares about something. And that's really an interesting take on character development. He's not mute. He's just ambivalent about what the majority of the world cares about. And when he cares, he tries. And when he tries, he's better than lots of people. It's a unique character that hasn't been done in wrestling, and I hope that they play that out to the end, wherever the end of it is. Fourth question is about why Cassidy's so popular. Jericho calls him a pimple on the backside of life, and he plans to pop the pimple, and Cassidy ignores this. The final question is why the rematch meant so much to both men. Cassidy interrupts here. He takes over here. He says that he knew what Jericho was doing, challenging a guy who doesn't talk to a debate. He's trying to embarrass him. That's not going to work. And Cassidy says Jericho's trying to humiliate him, but he's not humiliated. Cassidy says that next week is the biggest match of his life and Jericho's life. Cassidy said, imagine Jericho losing to the guy who puts his hands in his pockets. Bischoff turns, I guess, quasi-babyface and declares Cassidy the winner. Jericho said he hasn't liked Bischoff for 22 years. Bischoff says, by the way, it's actually 24. And they head off into commercial break land. Again, had there been an audience to intake this, this was phenomenal. This was exactly what it needed to be. Jake Hager attacks Cassidy and lays him out before they go to the commercial. Best friends run to the ring to make the save. Cassidy has so much more than your traditionalists think he does, and it's a new take on character development that's good in the end. Anyway, we go back, and Tony Schiavone interviews Britt Baker. He asks Baker who she's chosen for the opponent for Big Swole tonight. Swole finds out her opponent is, in fact, Reba. Big Swole defeats her in a complete squash. She uses a side headlock. Reba comes back with a suplex. Reba misses second row moonsault, and Swole hits the Dirty Dancing for the Pin. This was just another time filler. Actually, I think they could have given this extra few minutes to the main event of Moxley and Darby Allin, but they chose to put this here. Next week, we see Jericho versus Cassidy in the $7,000 obligation match. Cody and Scorpio Sky for the TNT Championship, plus the FTR Tag Team Appreciation Night, with Omega and Page versus Luchasaurus and Jungle Boy in a non-title match, which could be interesting, except Stu Grayson and Evil Uno versus the Young Bucks, not so interesting. And a special appearance by Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, the Rock and Roll Express was also announced. I hope they bring in some teams they didn't mention, because the Tag Team Appreciation Night could be fun and kind of enjoyable. So, Moxley versus Darby Allin for the AEW Championship in your main event. Moxley comes to the ring wearing a paper Moxley mask. Allin slaps Moxley before the bell. Allin comes wearing the mask. Anyway, there's a slap, and then Moxley comes back with a forearm. Moxley hits some really powerful strikes, and there's a shotgun dropkick by Allin. Allin hits a tope to the outside. Moxley throws Allin off to the stage into the ring post, which looked brutal and was well sold. I love the never say die attitude that Darby Allin brings forward. I think, again, it's a unique character. They brawl through the commercial break, and Moxley hits a exploder suplex. Allin comes back with a tackle through the ropes and crashes to the floor. Allin doesn't seem to care about hurting himself in the process. Basically, think a really thin cruiserweight Cactus Jack style, I think, is what Allin's actually going for. Allin hits a dive through the bottom and second ropes. Moxley does save him by catching him. Otherwise, if he crashed and burned, it could have been really bad. Allin then stops on Moxley's hands and hits a flip dive over the post to the floor. Back inside, Allin goes for the second rope coffin drop. Moxley blocks the maneuver. Allin hits a code red for the near fall. Moxley comes back with a belly-to-back suplex off the second rope. Wardlow and MJF make their way out to the ring. This is done perfectly. Wardlow takes the ref. MJF grabs the belt, lays into Moxley. Moxley's busted open with the belt shot. The only thing that I don't like about this is we'd already seen blood earlier in the night, so this loses its effect by proxy of already seeing blood earlier in the night. I think there's a way you can do blood once a week or once every other week on the show, but it has to be standalone valuable. Moxley comes back with a belly-to-back suplex off the second rope, and Wardlow and MJF, as mentioned, already come to the ring. And then Allin hits a coffin drop. Moxley kicks out just barely. There was a split second where I really believed they were going to do the switch. Not that it made sense, but I did buy it. Allin hits a backpack stunner and a running back elbow. Allin off with a second coffin drop, but Moxley catches him and puts him in a MMA-style sleeper. Moxley then hits a Gotch-style piledriver. Allin kicks out just barely at 2 3/4. And Moxley hits the paradigm shift and pins Darby Allin. Moxley cradles Allin's head as a sign of respect. After the match, we cut to MJF watching the monitor and flipping out backstage that his plan was foiled. Again, this is phenomenal for Darby Allin. The only challenge is he's got to have one or two big name wins in the next, I'd say, 3 months, before the end of the year, if he's going to retain credibility. If you don't mind him being second-tier guy and you're not trying to get him to be something that you can build your company around for years to come, okay. But where are you going to build if you're not building guys now for 3 years from now? Anyway, ultimately, overall, a really good show. I will be back with NXT later tonight. I still have to watch that show. I will also be back with AEW Dark and Impact, and the first in the, which will be really short because it was less than 40 minutes, the women's Deadly Draw tournament, and also a WCCW overview card. So like I said, a lot of content tonight, and hopefully more content on a regular basis. But until then, keep your feet on the ground, your mind in the moment. Till next time, everybody.